All right. Hi, everyone. You should be seeing my screen now. My name is Kayla Banda, as was mentioned. I work as a business advisor here in Oregon. I've been working as a business advisor for almost 10 years now. Time flies. In addition to that, I do some other things as well. And the topic of today's webinar around identity is a really important one. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working on a little bit of a side project that has to do with the development of my first book, which will be published this year. And what was intended to be a book on creativity quickly turned into a book on creative identity. And when that transition happened, this big light bulb went off for me in the work that I was doing with my small business clients. And I realized that this idea of creative identity was widely applicable, not just to artists and the artists that I was working with, but to the small business owners and entrepreneurs that I was working with as well. And I thought, why aren't we talking about this more? So, hence came the idea of the creator role and sharing how it can impact us as entrepreneurs in how we see ourselves and how we see the world. Let me go ahead and move forward. This is a little disclaimer slide about the content, and thank you to the UHSBDC for hosting today's webinar. So here's the point. Here's the point of today's class. When we're looking for long-term, sustainable success, I'm talking the kind that doesn't burn you out but energizes you. Do you know what I'm talking about? Those moments where you feel like you can do more than you've done in the past because of the successes that you've had. This is long-term, sustainable success. There's this really important element that we overlook more often than not, and it is identity. Identity is really what sits at the heart of that success, not only in business, not only in creative endeavors, but in our life. Now, I know that this is kind of a lofty claim, but we're going to talk through what that means today and how we can apply it to what we're building for our businesses. So I had mentioned that the heart of today's presentation was built out of, I guess I'm going to call it the idea of identity. Now, to paint a little picture for you, I am the person who on a free Sunday will go to the bookstore and spend hours in the creativity aisle. I've read all of the biggest bestseller creativity books. I've read all of the obscure ones too. Creativity has been something that I have been trying to study and understand. And in the process of doing that, what I've come to learn is that creativity on its own, it falls short. And I was trying to understand why this is. And the first thing that I uncovered was the idea that creativity is almost like this enigma. It's like this concept or idea that's really hard to take and grasp and turn tangible and actually apply to what we're doing. And as I was thinking about this chase that we have for creativity, trying to apply creativity to our business and to our marketing, I'm trying to understand what's missing here. And there became a clear distinction for me between the concept of creativity and the act of creating. And this is where that little light bulb that I was talking about went off. Because then I started to think about the work that I do in teaching strategy, business strategy to my small business owner clients and to the entrepreneurs that I work with. And I realized the same thing. All of this work, the 3 hour class that I will spend next week with my small business owner clients that's focused on business strategy, brand strategy, marketing strategy, it falls short. We do all this work in preparing and trying to understand, but strategy, like creativity, is kind of an enigma because we know that strategy, developing strategy, is not the same thing as implementing a strategy. Similar to how creativity is different from the act of creating, strategy is different from the act of implementing a strategy. And then the list just goes on and on. When we're spending time business planning, we're developing plans that sometimes are dozens of pages long. There's a missing piece because the act of planning is not the same as the act of implementing a plan. And you see, it's usually in that missing piece, that space between planning and executing a plan, that we start to run into trouble. That's where our small business owners, where we as entrepreneurs start to stumble. It feels like something's missing. The ground is shaky on the transition between planning and implementing a plan. And so, as I started to think about the experiences that my small business clients were having, that I was having, I started to think, wait, does that mean that every tool that I spend time searching for, that we together, advisor and clients, spend time working on, does that mean that they all fall short if we can't actually grasp them, take them, and widely apply them to our business? And I thought, oh no, there's a missing piece here. What is the missing piece? So I started to think about a variety of clients. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the last almost decade now. And there are some folks, when you sit down and you have this feeling, and it's mutual, there's this feeling that some are going to make it and some aren't. And it's really easy to chalk it up to statistics and to say, only 90% are going to survive 5 year, or sorry, 10% will survive 5 years and these kinds of things. We know what the statistics are. We know they're there, but why? And I started to think about, what is it that some clients are coming into the room with that others are not? And then this really kind of corny metaphor came up for me. Stick with me through what I think is maybe a trite metaphor, but very fitting. I started to think that creativity and strategy and planning and these tools that we're offering, that I'm offering to my clients, they're kind of like superpowers in a way. They're not easy to access. Not everyone can access and apply them with the same amount of ease. And then I started to think about superheroes. Stick with me. I know superheroes. What does this have to do with what we're talking about? Think about the origin story of a superhero. Every superhero starts as an ordinary citizen, except for maybe Superman, but we can talk about that later. Every superhero starts as an ordinary citizen. And at some point in their journey, somebody or something causes a moment where they have to say, there are these superpowers in front of me. There's a super villain that's threatening my people, my community, and I have to become a superhero. Now, this was important to me because it was very clear that before an ordinary citizen can take hold of any superpower, there's an identity shift that takes place. The ordinary citizen has to start believing that they're a superhero. Sounds a bit crazy to me. The ordinary citizen has to start believing that they can take hold of those superpowers, that they can fight the supervillain, that they and only they can save their city. There's an identity shift that happens. And I started to think about, what is the identity of a small business owner? Our identity is made up of all kinds of things. When we think of ourselves, we might think of ourselves as a daughter or a wife or a mom or a fill in the blank. And our work has an important impact on our identity and who we think we are. And so I thought, when we become a small business owner, what does that tell us about who we are? I don't think it really tells us much, because we know that there are happy small business owners and sad small business owners, and there are wealthy small business owners and poor small business owners. There are good small business owners and bad small business owners. What does being an entrepreneur, what does being a small business owner tell me about who I am and how I act? I don't think it tells us enough. So as we become a business owner, there's this identity shift that's not taking place. We become a small business owner, and all of a sudden, we're expected to be creative and to be strategic and to be able to think with the planning mindset. But to me, in some ways, those feel like superpowers. How are we supposed to use them, utilize them if we never have before? And so I started to think about this. All of the tools that we're offering, all of the tools we're searching for as entrepreneurs to help us work through and develop our businesses, there can be this gap between those tools and how we can actually utilize them and apply them to our business. It's kind of like when we talked in the beginning about there's creativity, but it's kind of like this enigma. It's this thing that's really hard to make tangible. How do we take hold of it? And when I was doing some of this work that I described to you earlier, identity, the identity shift is an incredibly important component that most of us are overlooking. Because identity is what gives us the self-belief that we need to be able to take a hold of those tools and use them effectively. That's the identity shift that happens for the superhero. They go from being an ordinary citizen to saying, it might be crazy, but maybe I can use these superpowers. Maybe I am the only one who can use these superpowers to serve my city. The identity shift is incredibly important. That's why today we're here to talk about identity. Now, like I said, when we become small business owners, we aren't really given an active identity. We have some ideas of what a business owner looks like. Maybe if we've grown up with business owners as parents, or we worked in a small business at some point, like we might have some ideas and assumptions of what a small business owner looks like. But I think that we can create a more tangible, active identity for ourselves that goes beyond just business ownership, to be frank. It goes into our life as a whole. We all know that it's very hard to keep our business completely separate from who we are as people. And that's because as business owners and as entrepreneurs, we lead the mission of our business. And so I want to offer to you the idea of the creator, and what I like to call the creator role as an active identity. Now, let me describe to you here what I mean by active identity. I think of it kind of like a pair of glasses. These are my blue light glasses that I wear whenever I'm at the computer for prolonged periods. The creator role can be like an active identity, a pair of glasses that we can put on that impacts our view of the world. Not only our view of the world, but our perspective of how we show up in that world. This is a really important consideration because when we have an idea of who we are and how we show up in the world, it is prescribing action for us, whether we know it or not. So today we're going to intentionally set some, I'm going to call them bumpers, like as if we're bowling. We're going to intentionally set some bumpers for ourselves to help prescribe action in the times when it's really hard to act. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about it. So then what is the creator role? I've said I'm going to offer this to you as an active identity that you can choose to put on. I guess maybe it's almost like the cape that a superhero wears, right? It's like the mark of a superhero. I defined it as more like glasses we put on to change our perspective. I'm going to take a little bit of a cop out for this question. How do we define the creator role? By talking about what it's not. You see, I think there's a lot of value and benefit in describing what things are not to help clarify what they are. Now, I want to take a moment here to say that language is a very interesting thing because some words mean some things to people that they don't mean to other people. We have associations with certain words. And so I want you to have the freedom to use whatever language works for you. The language that I like to use to talk about the opposite of the creator is the victim. You see, I think of identity kind of like a spectrum. So if you can see in my screen, I've got my arms here. It's like a spectrum. At one end sits the victim, and at one end sits the creator. Now, it's important to note here that we're not here to demonize the victim. You see, we're all a victim at some point in our life because life happens to us. We cannot avoid it. Sometimes life happens to us. But the difference is that we can intentionally shift like this to slide back into the creator role where life happens for us. You see, it's just a perspective shift, frankly, isn't it? Life happening to us versus life happening for us. And again, I don't mean to demonize that sometimes we are a victim to things that happen to us, but here's the good news, we don't have to stay there. We can practice shifting back into the creator role. And it is a practice. We're going to talk about how we can do that today. So the first step to understanding what the victim role is to start to understand the voice of the victim. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it feels like to be within these two separate identities. The first is that when we're stuck in the victim mindset, we are constantly reacting to life. This is really easy to do as small business owners because we operate within this macro and micro environment where stuff is constantly happening. So stuff's happening, and then we're trying to react to the thing, and then more stuff happens, and then we're reacting, and it's like this. Stuff comes in, and then we try to react. I hope you can see my little camera because I'm such a hand talker. Here's the difference with the creator role. We act, something happens as a response. We act and something happens as a response. Again, it's a perspective shift, but it's an incredibly important one. Have you ever seen the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros? I wish I had it on a slide. The Ouroboros is a symbol. It's usually either a dragon or a snake. And it's like, if it's a dragon going in a circle and the dragon is eating its own tail. And it's like it's constantly like trying to eat itself. Okay, this is an important visual reminder for me to say, I lead, I design. I am the head, not the tail. Now, this is a common phrase that we hear a lot, but that's an important one to keep in mind. It's acting instead of reacting. Another important element of the victim mindset, and this is an incredibly important, or I guess I should say regular experience for us as business owners, is default. I often have folks who come to me and they're looking for default questions and answers that they need to know to start their business. Give me a checklist and then tell me all the answers that go along with that checklist. It's really hard to do that because there is no default. Because you see, in the creator role, we are intentionally designing those questions and answers. When we're looking for default, we're only ever doing things that other people have done before. And we know that when we're building a long-term sustainable business, we are doing things that people have never done before. The other thing, when we're talking about default, and this is kind of a different use of the word, sometimes being in the victim mindset is our default. And it's true for a lot of us, and it's not something that's, like it's not a shameful thing. It's just the fact that it's sometimes easier in a weird way because it doesn't feel easier, but sometimes it's easier to get stuck there. The victim role, the victim mindset can be our default. Now, here's the last and I think most important one. In a victim mindset, we live in doubt. Now, let's be honest, as business owners, it's really easy to live in doubt because there are so many unanswered questions. Can I do this? Does the market even want it? Like, is this the right team for me, right? There's all these questions that we're asking as we're building a small business. And it's really easy to live in doubt. But this is the important shift. This is the shift from ordinary citizen to superhero. This is the shift from victim to creator, is to move from doubt into belief. Here's the important piece. When we're doubting outcomes more often than not. Sometimes we're doubting ourselves, but more often than not, we're doubting outcome. If I do this thing, I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I'm doubting the outcome. In the creator role, it's not necessarily about having belief that the outcome is going to be exactly what you envision it to be. It is belief in your ability to act toward the outcome you want. Doubt in outcome versus belief in self-action. This is the difference between the victim and the creator. So let's take a moment to, let's summarize here, I guess, first. In the victim mindset, we feel powerless. There are times when we feel powerless, and we know that's true, especially as I mentioned, as we're working in a macro and micro environment. There's all kinds of things that are out of our control. And sometimes we feel powerless. Another thing is that we avoid risk. Because of fear, because of doubt, we avoid risk. And we know that characteristic of avoiding risk will not help us build a long-term, sustainably profitable business. Of course, there's a balance, right? Like we want to be aware of risk and then we want to act accordingly, but we cannot avoid it altogether for fear of getting hurt. And here's the other one is when we're in the victim mindset, we are waiting for change to happen to us. In the creator role, we are hyper focused on taking ownership. Now think about the superhero. See, I know it's a little bit of a trite metaphor, but it really works when we're talking about the creator role. The superhero says, I'm the only one who can do this, and I must act. Not only that, but the creator acts in the face of fear. That's called bravery. When you act in the face of fear, that's what superheroes do. That's what creators do. And we intentionally move forward. Even if it's a little step at a time, we move forward. So let's take a moment to look at some business examples of when the victim pops up in our head. See, I want to make an important clarification here. Our presentation today is focused on how do we design action. But in order to do that, we have to remember that every action we take starts as a thought. Our thoughts are incredibly important and powerful. So it's important that we understand what our thoughts sound like so that they are not creating unintended actions for us. So let's think about the fear of networking. Many of my clients, I would say a majority, their business relies on the ability to effectively network, whether that means building a legitimate referral system with other providers, or it might just mean that they need to develop a support system. They need to have folks within the community who can share with them, like the ears on the ground, that kind of thing. Most of my clients cannot work in silos. They need to network. It's not the easiest thing for most of us. You know what I'm saying? Being at the networking event, or maybe you have the opportunity to speak somewhere, it's terrifying. And you see, we start to have a bunch of victim thoughts. Maybe we're not recognizing them. And then you start to feel like maybe you've got a stomach bug coming on. And then all of a sudden, now you can't go to the event, right? This has happened to all of us, or most of us at least. Let's talk about what the victim sounds like versus what the creator sounds like. Now, I'd like to say that I'm not here to say you need to start thinking like this, because it's hard to do. What I am saying is I want you to start listening for the victim. I want you to start listening and trying to identify when the victim is here in your thoughts. You see, the victim sounds something like this. I'm just not a natural speaker. I am going to embarrass myself. The creator says things like, I can practice. This is my opportunity to practice. I can improve over time. The victim says things like, I never know what to say at those things. Like, I always feel so awkward. And the creator says, well, I can prepare some conversation starters, and I'm just going to focus on listening so that I don't have to talk so much. The victim says things like, nobody cares. Nobody cares what I have to say. Nobody cares if I'm there or not. I can sit here on the couch instead of not going, and nobody's going to care. The creator says, my perspective and story matter. I have to find the right people. How many of you hear the victim sometimes? I know I can't see you. I know you're not probably raising your hand to your computer, but I want you to ask yourself, how many times do I hear the victim? And then, as a follow-up question, I want you to ask how many times that you recognize it. Let's look at another example, and then we can talk a little bit more about how do we make the shift here so that this becomes our automatic response. Here's another one, business failure. I'm talking specifically about a product launch. So I have a client who's here in Northeast Portland. He owns a cafe, really super cool cafe. And I've been advising with him for a little over 2 years. He's been open for 2 years now. And he had this incredible idea called Brunchtopia. All right, so just to give you a little bit of a perspective, where I live, brunch reigns supreme. All right, people love brunch. The other thing is that when people say dogs are a man's best friend, here we mean it. Okay, dogs are a man's best friend. So my client comes to me, he's like, I've got an idea for Brunchtopia. I want to try to increase my weekend traffic. Weekends are really where I make money. I want to make more money. I've got outside seating for the spring. This was last year, spring and summer. As part of Brunchtopia, I'm going to offer super cool specialty mimosas, and I'm going to start taking all my food waste, leftover quinoa, leftover carrot scraps, and things from some of the meals that he's making, and I'm going to put together a dog menu. This is not an unusual thing where we live for there to be dog menus, a bowl of white rice and some chicken or whatever the case might be, so that folks can bring their dogs to the patios. The dogs can eat, you can eat, we're all happy. So he launches Brunchtopia. It flopped. Okay, I'm telling you, it flopped. Now, I've been working with this person for 2 years. He's a friend of mine, as we've got to know each other over time. This individual has spent more time than not in the victim role. And so when things happen, it's a big setback. It's a huge setback. It causes this feeling of burnout and exasperation and feeling like, why am I doing this? But not when Brunchtopia flopped. You see, when Brunchtopia flopped, he came to me and he was living here in the creator role. Before, he would have come to me and said, see, this is the proof I needed that all my doubts were right the whole time. We are constantly looking for proof that all the doubts we had were correct. But the creator says something different. The creator says, no, this is feedback. Let me see what I can learn. Let me refine my approach and try again. The victim says, people didn't buy, so it's proof that my idea is bad. Good or bad. No in between. Good or bad. It was bad. The creator says, no, what can I learn? This is a learning experience. Did I market to the right people? The victim says, I should just quit now before I waste more time. How many of you have heard the victim? I have heard the victim many times. I still hear the victim sometimes. But the difference is that we can start to practice the role of the creator, where the creator says success comes from persistence. What's the next step forward? You see, my client came to me here. First thing, this was one of the first times that he had come to me as a creator. And immediately started saying, I think we got some good feedback. We started talking about demographic. We were targeting the 20-something-year-olds, for brunch, but turns out 20-year-olds aren't really drinking much anymore. So the mimosas we think were not of interest to them because, side note, the dog bowls performed beautifully. So the feedback was, okay, well, maybe we can focus on more like specialty health teas and things like that, because turns out Gen Z wants ginger tea. They don't want a mimosa. I don't know. Everybody's a little different. It's a completely different way of thinking. And when setbacks happen and we start to feel that, that burnout and that, like I said, that feeling of exasperation, and should I be doing this? So much of that is coming from the victim role. Our first step is to start to identify the victim thoughts, because more often than not, they are dictating our life. They are dictating our action. So our thing to practice, our homework, is to start trying to identify the victim thoughts. You see, just like an ordinary citizen has to make an intentional identity shift to superhero, we need to make an intentional shift from victim to creator. It takes practice. And it takes you intentionally saying, I am going to be the creator. And maybe you have different language. Maybe you're going to say, I am the superhero. I'm not the ordinary citizen. Or maybe you have some kind of other language that really resonates with you. Find what that is. But it takes an intentional identity shift. How many times have you intentionally tried to create your own identity? I spent the whole first part of my life never doing that. It just was what it was because of how I grew up and what the voices of other people were in my head and these kinds of things. Now is your opportunity to intentionally make the identity shift that you need to be a successful business owner, one who's happy in the work that you're doing. Okay. Take a moment here. Time to shift into the creator role. All right, once we do that, we're a superhero now. We are no longer an ordinary citizen. We are a superhero. Guess what? Superheroes have supervillains who become lifelong arch nemeses, I guess. I wish that we could have an open dialogue about what you guys all know about all the different superheroes, because I know they all have an arch nemesis to deal with. So does the creator. Can you guess who the creator's arch nemesis is? It's the imposter. Okay, how many of you have been hearing a lot about imposter syndrome over the last, I don't know, 5 years? It's become really, really prevalent, kind of a buzzword. I think it's great. I think it's incredibly important that it's becoming a buzzword because the imposter is the creator's arch nemesis. You see, the imposter is the supervillain of our story. The unfortunate thing, and I don't know if it's like this in superhero stories, the imposter never dies. We beat it, we win the battle, it crawls into the sewer, like in Spider-Man with the lizard guy, who the doctor or the scientist who turns into a lizard. Okay, he crawls back into the sewer and then comes out again later, and we've got to battle the imposter again. But what's nice is that the more we battle the imposter, not only do we become more confident in our superpowers, but we start to understand the imposter's goal, how the imposter acts. You see, the imposter wants to whisper doubt. The imposter fuels the flame of fear. Wow, look at that alliteration. The imposter wants to keep us stuck in hesitation. You've likely experienced this in the process of starting your business, whether that's now or whether that was 10 years ago. So, just like the victim, we need to spend some time understanding what the imposter sounds like. Because when we understand what the imposter sounds like, it's easier for us to be able to identify that's the imposter. That's a powerful thing because when we identify that's the imposter, you see, before we just start acting in accordance with the imposter, not anymore because we're creators. So what does the imposter sound like? My next slide has a lot of text. Sorry, I broke the cardinal rule #1 of slide decks, but I think it's helpful. The imposter says things like, and let's see how many of these are relevant for you. I'm not really an expert. Why would anyone listen to me? Now, the creator responds, think of it like a battle, right? The creator responds and says, no, I have valuable experience and insights that can help people. This one, the imposter says this a lot to me. I just got lucky. I just got lucky that one time. It doesn't mean that it's going to happen again. I just got lucky that one time. It doesn't build my experience. The creator says I put in the effort by acting on what's in my control. The imposter says this one a lot. I don't belong here. It's trying to pretend it's you and it's saying, I don't belong here. The creator says, I belong wherever I show up. Because here's an interesting piece. I talk with folks actually a lot about this element of feeling like we're not belonging. Belonging is just the thing we made up. You are where you show up, and that's it. The imposter says things like, what if they realize I don't know what I'm doing? This is especially true early on for early stage business owners because you're learning. This is incredibly important. It's so funny because, like, let's go back, a few years depending on how old we are, a few years, so when we're kids. When we're kids, it's understood and expected that you're going to learn something by doing it. Like you're going to learn how to ride the bike by riding the bike and falling off the bike. But at some point in our journey as adults, we start to begin believing that in order to do something, we must already know how to do it. Well, that doesn't make much sense, does it? I have clients all the time who will tell me, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this is right for me because I don't know what I'm doing, talking about entrepreneurship. And I say, of course you don't know what you're doing. You've never done it before. This is your first time ever owning a business. How would you ever know what to do? You're learning and doing at the same time. The imposter says things like, I just need one more qualification, then I'm ready. Then I'm really qualified. The creator says things like, experience and action build credibility too, not just credentials. And last, the imposter says things like, someone else can do this better than me. But the creator responds like the superhero and says, nobody else can do this the way I can do it. Because you bring unique experience, you bring unique background, you bring unique perspective. No one can do it the way you can do it. How many of you have heard the imposter before? You can raise your hand just for yourself. How many of you have heard the imposter? How do you usually respond? Do you respond with action that is what the imposter wants the whole time? Let's start practicing responding like a creator. Now, like I said, when we're starting to get to know an arch nemesis, we need to understand how they work, how they battle. The imposter's number one weapon is overwhelm. Now, I don't need to ask how many of you have ever experienced overwhelm because I'm pretty sure every single person in our little virtual environment right now has experienced overwhelm. But here's the challenge with overwhelm. It's a root cause. You see, it comes up as symptoms. It's like when you go to the doctor and you're like, I'm not feeling good. This is happening. This is my symptoms. And they're like, oh, you got the common cold. Overwhelm is the root cause. It shows up in symptoms. You see, when clients come to me with these symptoms that I'm going to show you here in a second, I recognize overwhelm is where it stems from. And it's usually the imposter, the feeling of imposter syndrome that's bringing that to bear. So what are the symptoms of overwhelm? Sometimes they can sound like overthinking every decision. This is super easy, especially when we're starting up, because there are so many decisions that need to be made. We have this constant fear about what if I make the wrong choice? Fear of visibility is another symptom that comes up a lot with overwhelm and the imposter. What if I fail and people see it? What if my family sees? What if my friends sees? What if people judge me? Another symptom is feeling unqualified. We saw it in the last slide. I don't know enough to do this yet. Well, guess what? Things are constantly changing. You'll never know everything. But the imposter doesn't care. The imposter just wants you to believe that you don't know enough. We don't know what enough means. You just need to know that you don't know enough. Another symptom is comparing to others. We know about this symptom, right? We try to avoid it. It's really hard. This is, I think, the most insidious because we often frame this symptom as something positive called perfectionism. I just want it to be really, really good, right? I'm putting all my heart and soul. I just want it to be really good. I want it to be perfect. And we frame it as something that's positive, but really it's just keeping us stuck in inaction. That is the goal of the imposter, is to keep us in a cycle of inaction. Because when we're in a cycle of inaction, we can't get anywhere. Has anybody ever shared with you the idea of the difference between motion and action? I don't remember who, what, when, where I heard this concept, but it changed my life, okay? Not to be dramatic. Motion is like you're running in place or like you're running on a treadmill. You're going, you're going, you're going, you're working, you're getting tired, you're sweating, you're gasping for air, you're working so hard and you're not getting anywhere. But you're exhausted, you're exasperated, you're so tired, your body's aching, but I'm not getting anywhere. Action, on the other hand, is very different. Action is kind of like the tortoise. Small little steps, small little steps over and over and over, and eventually we get a mile down the road. You see, when we're starting to compare to others, this can be really challenging because we look at so and so, and it's like, I'm over here running my butt off, doing all the things that I can think of to do, and I'm not getting anywhere. Why is that person just slowly walking down the street? What's the difference? The difference is we're stuck in motion. Today, when we're talking about action, that's what I mean. We're talking about forward moving action, one small step at a time. The imposter wants us stuck in action. So, how does the creator respond? Well, when the creator experiences the symptoms of overwhelm, we reframe it in things like this. First, we simplify decision making by acknowledging and believing there's no perfect choice. There's just the next step. You see, in the training program that I run for our early stage small businesses here in Oregon, I constantly tell folks, more often than not, you're going to get the super annoying answer of it depends. It depends because frankly, there is no default answer. There is no perfect choice. It's what you design it to be. There's just the next step forward. Reframing visibility. This is kind of like when the superhero, there's always that moment in the movie when they're like, I don't want to be a superhero anymore. And they try not to be. And then people start dying and the city's going up in flames. And they're like, my people need me. My city needs me. Well, guess what? Your people need you. Your customers, your clients, the people who you're providing value to, they need you. So if that means you have to fly up in the middle of the city and start battling some unknown supervillain, that's what you got to do. Your audience needs what you can offer. You can show up for them. We really focus on our strengths. What do I already know that can help me move forward? You know what's really annoying about the victim and the imposter is that they're both constantly trying to convince us that we're not already powerful. You have years and years of experience of things you've done right, things you've done wrong, all the things. We limit comparisons. This is my own race at my own pace. Easier said than done, but it's a focus of the creator. Lastly, and most importantly, when we're feeling overwhelmed, the creator takes small, imperfect actions. The goal is that we don't need to feel ready, we just need to start. Now, I think that our conversation would not be complete without talking about fear. Because fear is an incredibly real element for our experience as humans. It's been ingrained in us as an instinctual survival element of life, right? Fear is constantly here. And so, as I've tried to understand what fear means for me in my life, what fear means to my clients in their life and their business experience, there is a phrase that comes to my mind every time I am afraid or I feel my clients afraid. Where there is fear, wherever you feel fear, faith must follow. Where there is fear, faith must follow. I tell myself this all the time. Where there is fear, faith must follow. Now, here's an important distinction. Remember how the victim doubts outcomes, but the creator has faith in action? When we're experiencing fear, all that we can do to move forward is to put our faith in the next step, in action, to say, if I take this next step, I have faith it's going to get me one step closer to where I'm meant to be. Where there is fear, faith must follow. So, what does fear look like in the creator role? The first is that fear is a signpost, not a stop sign. Let me give an example of this. I have a client kind of down in one of the southern suburbs here to my city, and she has an idea for a brick and mortar space. It's a service-based business, brick and mortar, and she's in an incredibly good situation, meaning all of the elements are lined up. She's got previous work experience in the industry. Her financial situation in her household is strong, meaning that there is not significant financial risk if the business were to go south for some reason. Everything's lining up. We know, and we've done market research to say that the community wants her there and is ready and already supporting her vision. She's in a great place. So she's working on the financial projections, as it is an important step to what we're doing. And she sends me an email and she's like, starts off really good. She's like, Kayla, I'm working through the financial projections. It's all looking really positive. I'm trying to stay conservative with my projections and it's looking really good. And then paragraph break. So tell me why I'm emailing you to ask you to help me off the fear cliff. Those were her exact words. I love how she phrased that. And I said, so and so, this is just in my immediate email. Fear is a signpost, not a stop sign. You're experiencing this fear right now because the financial projections are an incredibly important part of what we're doing. It's like a flashing yield sign that says, careful, there's a corner coming up, slow down, take your time. That's what you're experiencing. That's what fear is doing for you right now. It's doing you a service. It's not saying stop, jump out the car, the road is ended and you're about to go off a cliff. That's what she felt like. Now, what's interesting is later that week we met because she's like, we need to talk about this. And about 15 minutes in, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the fear. Is it fear of visibility? Is it fear of failure? Like, what is it? And by 15 minutes in, I start to see her eyes welling up. And she's like, Kayla, I am scared I'm going to become a bad mom when I start this business. I didn't expect that. I've had other clients who have said similar things. I feel like I'm going to neglect my marriage. I'm scared I'm going to become a bad mom. And I said, okay, well, this is a signpost. What do we need to do to help you maintain your focus on being the great mom that you are as you pursue this business? What action can we take to help mitigate that fear? When we're dealing with fear in the creator role, we put our faith in action, not in outcomes. And that's because in the creator role, we know and believe that our outcomes are impacted by things that are out of our control. How many of you are self-identified control freaks? Raising my hand. Can you see it in the raising my hand? You want to control outcomes, but the reality is that you can't. All you can do is take the appropriate actions that you think are going to get you there. You let go, release the control, put faith in your action. When we're experiencing fear, the easiest way to move forward is with small steps that give us the feeling of small wins. You see, every time we have a small win, every time that we've had a battle against our nemesis, every time that we've acted even when we're scared, being brave, it builds our confidence. And so fear actually kind of sits at the bottom. It's like the fire that starts an upward spiral, upward spiral. When we experience fear, we take a small action. We get a small win. We get more confidence in ourselves to take more action, to get another win, to get more confidence, and so on and so forth. So when you're experiencing fear, think about how fear can serve you. Fear can serve as a signpost to say, hey, pay attention, this is important. And fear can start that upward spiral to say, if I can act in the face of fear, I'm going to start my bravery spiral. It's a cool thing when you're in it, Doesn't always happen, and sometimes we have to restart, but it can be valuable. All right. So, as we start to look at the last few minutes of our conversation here today, we've talked about this idea of the creator role. So, how do we make this identity shift? How do we go from ordinary citizen to superhero? The first step is we must recognize the thoughts and behaviors of the victim. Remember, actions start in our thoughts. How often are you acting because the victim is telling you to? Do you want to do that? I don't want to do that. We have to recognize the thoughts and behaviors of the victim, because when we do, we have the opportunity to say, that's not me. We can disconnect those thoughts and behaviors from who we believe to be, ourselves to be. That's our identity, who we believe ourselves to be. A victim thought pops up. I say, wait, that sounds like a victim. That's not me. You see this forward pushing movement of disconnection? We have to take the time to do that. And then when we do, we can reframe it with the creator role. So I hear a victim thought, I push it away, I say, that's not me, I'm a creator. How does a creator act in this situation? How does a creator act? Once we can reframe it with the creator role mindset, then we can act. You see, it's interesting because as we've talked about today, our goal is intentional action. But these first 3 steps are absolutely the most important part. You know, sometimes I have friends who will ask me, Kayla, how do you just do the thing? How do you just Nike do it? You know? And it's a good question. And I see other folks, and sometimes I wonder the same. You see these folks that are walking along, they don't seem exasperated, they're making progress, they're taking action. Well, something happened to me and I realized what it was. So I was at a cafe. The owner of the cafe is the owner of the editing and design agency that I'm using to work on my book. So she opened a cafe. So now I go all the time because I want to support, and they're open late. And I'm the person who likes to drink coffee at 6 o'clock. If you can tell, I'm like running a million miles a minute, right? So I go to the cafe, and Allie, who's the name of the owner, she comes up to me. She's like, Kayla, are you here for the open mic? And I'm like, no, I'm here to work. I know nothing about an open mic. She's like, you want to do it? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. Freeze frame. 1 second between when Allie asked me if I want to do the open mic to share about some new stuff from my book, and when I said yes. 1 second in between there. But do you know what happened in my mind? First, the victim thoughts started coming, and the imposter thoughts. I thought, I had no idea this was happening today. I'm not prepared. I'm wearing sweatpants. I just started my period and my head kind of hurts. I am not prepared. Okay, freeze frame again. Wait, Kayla. Those are victim thoughts. That's not me. What would the creator do in this situation? I think the creator would say something like, what a low risk opportunity to start reading aloud some new excerpts from my book. I've never done it before. But Allie's here. She's a champion of mine. She's going to be there rooting me on in the back. I can look at her and, there's about 7 people here. So not too bad. Get up and do it, Kayla. This is a great opportunity. Why not? Get up and do it. Freeze frame. Play. There comes the yes. You see, the time between the question and the yes, the intentional action, all this is going on in our minds. We don't give ourselves enough opportunity to identify the victim thoughts that result in actions we don't want to take. I don't want to say no. I want to say yes to this. This is a good opportunity. It takes 10 minutes of my time. But we need to practice this. If you do, you can create a new response, one that's almost automatic, like the one that I experienced. There becomes this new automatic response where you recognize the victim thoughts, you disconnect them from who you are. You're a creator, you're a superhero. You reframe it with the creator mindset, and then you act. And only then do you act when you know that your action is in line with the identity you've selected for yourself? Before I go on to my final thoughts here, I want to present a challenge to you. Today, sometime today, whether it's right after this webinar or later tonight as you're falling asleep, whatever, I want you to take a minute to intentionally select an identity for yourself. Maybe you call it the creator, maybe you call it the superhero, maybe you call it something else fun. And if you do, send me an email and tell me what it is because I want to know. And then I want you to make a commitment to starting this process, intentionally trying to recognize when the victim and the imposter are trying to keep you out of action. I want you to practice this new response. I want you to practice it so much that it becomes automatic. Because when you do that, I promise you, your experience as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, as a human being is going to change. That's my challenge to you. So here are my final thoughts. The creator role, as I like to call it, is an active identity. This means you have to choose to put it on. You choose to put those glasses on. And what's beautiful about this active identity is that it can prescribe action for you. How does the creator act? That's the question that lets you know how you act. How does the creator act in this moment? That is the action I'm going to take. And it's not just in big moments. It's not when there are huge setbacks or huge opportunities. It's every day, every day. But you see, we have to choose it and then we have to practice it daily. Practice makes progress. Don't forget that. I hope that you spend some time today thinking about how identity has impacted your entrepreneurial journey. Have you spent time thinking about it? Well, I know that for the last hour, you've spent some time thinking about it, and I hope that you will spend more time. Thank you, everyone, for your attention today, and we can go ahead and open it up to some Q&A.